improves if your data sets tend to increase. And that's where it becomes important. Where are you sourcing your data from? Now, is this something that we are doing for the first time? Have we done this before? Well, actually not. Simple pattern matching techniques and statistical methods existed even in the past, and they're still being used. For example, there's so much of data available today for us to look at what is good behavior versus what is bad behavior. You could still continue to use that, use statistical methods like min, mid, max, averages to give you a lot of information of determining what is abnormal outliers in your network possible today. The challenge is because of the complexity that we are now talking of, because of the interdependency between the different entities that we are talking of today, the volumes and the quantum of data has gone up drastically. And that is where your typical methods that you used at human scale are now becoming challenging for you to scale up to. And that's where you want to start using machine learning to go into a machine scale, because there's lots more data to consume. And machines are able to do a fabulous job. The other thing that was used in the past was rules around first order logic. Let me take another example to explain this. Now, a typical behavior that Anubhav has exhibited in the past is Anubhav logs into a server called Alpha, and from there logs into a server called Delta. And this is a very normal source of behavior that Anubhav has been exhibiting over the last few months and weeks. Now, I also see that Anubhav's machine has suspicious malicious activity, which he's exchanging over the internet, and everything else which he's been continuing to do is staying, which means he continues to log into Alpha and Delta during his normal course of application. So typical first order logic would require me to go back and recheck, because now I render Anubhav as being suspicious, and I would now want to go back and check whether his otherwise normal activity is still something which I want to consider as normal activity, or there could be something underlying in terms of behavior. So these were techniques that have been used even in the past. But the point I'm trying to bring out is, given the scale now we are operating at, machine learning can complement all of this and actually can build up some of these logics within itself to make your life easier. And I'm not trying to allude to the fact that trying to deviate from the static world that we had in terms of signatures is no longer required. Well, that's definitely required, because it is addressing a very important problem that all of us face today, the problem of fatigue. With static rules that we have in place, a lot of noise gets cut off. So if I had to look at, say, 10,000 alerts, and if my static noise is cut off because of the static rules I have in place, and from those 10,000, I just drill down to 500. A lot of work done for me, because I've been able to leverage known bad behavior, known bad domains, and known bad hashes, and I'm able to segregate and cut the noise for myself. Where I want to go and use machine learning and intelligence is around the evolving part of security, where global threat intel may only give me an indication, but it cannot come and tell me that if there is a localized version of that attack going on, that may not go ahead and get detected in the static world. And in the simple way to explain this, if I have triggers set in my network to sound an alarm if something goes wrong, which is basis set of some actions that were performed in the network, threat actors are not going to go ahead and do those activities where the alarm is going to get sounded. They will evade all of that. And that is where your machine learning activity around trying to identify bad behavior or abnormal behavior has to come into picture, which deviates from the static checks that we did. In other words, continue to look at prioritizing your known bad activity, but focus on what you've been so far classifying as good, and using the elimination technique, which goes back to the competency questions I asked. You are telling me you are Anubhav, you're telling me you are a trusted entity, you're telling me that you've been demonstrating good behavior, but you also just now logged into my finance server and downloaded the payroll data. You've been good otherwise, but is this activity still classified as good? And how do I filter out and fish out this activity from what is otherwise perceived as good? Is going to rely on behavior modeling, is going to rely on fingerprinting the behavior, fingerprinting myself as a user, and then making those deterministic decisions. That is where we want to make this conversation move into. So in a quick summary, what I wanted to speak in the introduction phase was talking about this whole idea of fingerprinting, and the whole idea of digital fingerprinting is important because this tells you uniquely that this is a user called Anubhav, and he is classified as somebody who does this particular job. He's categorized to exhibit a particular behavior, and now basis what I am seeing in terms of what he did on the network, I am fairly confident that he has turned malicious. That is what I am trying to explain as a concept. Why is fingerprinting important here? I will speak about it as we progress into the future slides. Good segue now into go slightly deeper into what is this whole concept of building the analytical pipeline, how does it get relevant, and so on and so forth. Let's start with a small definition. What does definition of machine learning really talk about? And this is a definition that was picked up in 1959, and it says it's a field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. You don't have to keep sitting on it and telling it what to do. It should have the capability of explicitly being able to explicitly program itself. Now, some of the concepts, and this is just a subset, there are many other concepts in machine learning, and I'm not a data scientist, so arguably I'm not the authority in this space, but for the relevance of making this conversation interesting, I thought it's important to speak about what are the different machine learning techniques, and I think you'll kind of relate to it as I go and speak about it. One is the simple supervised learning technique. Now, you all would have used it in some shape and form. We use some of our phones to click pictures, and some of the apps that we use will come back and say, can you tag this picture and say it's you? Of course it is me, and I will say this is Anubhav. Now, maybe you go onto another site and you try and take more pictures. Supervised learning will come back and ask you, is this you? And it will start filtering out and saying, yes, I am able to find Anubhav. Or it may come back and tell me, you know what? Somebody's posted a picture of you. Do you confirm it's you or not? So that is where supervised learning, by virtue of asking those right competency questions or the ground truths that I spoke of, starts yielding to you some level of learning. Unsupervised learning is slightly more broad, which is where the machine is going to pick up hordes of data and start making sense of it. The best example is in retail. So you could start making analytics of somebody who goes and typically, we take an example which is very relevant in today's time and age. If we make the bold attempt of going out of our houses today to buy some grocery to a grocery store, in addition to picking up essentials, there is a clear indication that I'm going to scan over the shelves to see if there is a new sanitizer available. I'm going to pick up the sanitizer. So now this could be unsupervised learning, which is giving outliers and telling me people who typically came to the store 4 or 5 months back, when they came to the store to pick up groceries, also look for maybe in the case of men, look for the latest and greatest shaving foam. Whereas now all of them are trying to find out what's the best sanitizer to pick up. I'm just giving a crude example here, but that's an example of unsupervised learning. So it keeps learning on its own, and the challenge is back on you and how you're going to use it back into effective analytics. The third form of machine learning is reinforced learning. Now, this is a broader set of learning. This is where I keep challenging questions, asking those questions time and again to make a deterministic decision that yes, what you are looking for is the right answer or not. So this is a set of questions that you keep asking. And the best example I have seen at home of reinforced learning is, I don't know if your children play this game with the Alexa app, which is called the Akinator, where they will just go to the Alexa app and say, okay, Alexa, start the Akinator, and it'll say, okay, hi, I'm Akinator. Think about a real or fictional character, and I will try and guess who it is. And they will ask you those 15, 20 questions and make a guess to determine that what's the right answer. And that's exactly what reinforced learning is, where it keeps asking you questions and bases the answers that you give, it will make a determined decision on what's the fact going on. So the reason I brought this up is it's important to now take this back into the security domain. Now, any behavior analytics solution that you talk of, any tool that you talk of, has some training data on which it works and starts building its machine learning algorithm and starts classifying. Example, it would take some data to figure out and run an algorithm to figure out, is this behavior that is being exhibited that of a printer? Fair enough. I pick that up, start classifying that. Now there is new data coming in, which tells me that this printer now is doing some activity which is slightly deviating from it. So the competency questions now is, first of all, tell me, is this really the printer? Have I gone wrong? And if the answer is yes, it is still the printer, I'm going to now make a prediction that this printer is now starting to deviate. So this is how you bring in the machine learning, apply the new data, apply the right competency questions, and keep making sense out of it. And your security solutions have to now do this task and do this task with some level of precision. Because if they fail, they are not reducing your cybersecurity fatigue, they're adding to your fatigue. If you're going to spend time now investigating whether what your security solution told you from an analytics perspective is correct or not, and is it a false positive or not, I think it's not really worth the investment. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Now let's come to understand what do we mean by observables, because I'm going to again use this word very, very frequently. So the observable is any measurable event that has occurred within a domain that you're talking about. Very, very crude example of this in the past, when you talked about speed racing or car racing, one of the primary observable that you observed was speed, and that was a focus. How fast can you go? How fast can you go and win the race? Come 2020, when you talk about Ferraris, well, the observables are plenty. It's no longer just about the speed. It's about the human factor element that the driver builds in. How fast you can come out of a pit stop and get back into functioning. What's the track? What's the efficiency of the track, and so on and so forth. So your appreciation of the measurable event that your security solution has to do in today's time and age has to be cognizant of the context it's working in. And that context is a moving target. It changes. Example again, pre-COVID and post-COVID, behaviors that you will see and the observables that matter to you have undergone a drastic change. Who is defining it when you're trying to do these kind of discussions? Now let me unveil the next big problem that comes in with security analytics today, which is the problem of encrypted traffic. All of us know that gone are the days where only a small percentage of your traffic was encrypted. I think all of us are aware of the fact that 90% of the traffic today, and it will only go up in time, is going to be encrypted traffic. Now, you also need to know one thing, that there is one belief which says that most of these threat actors are hiding behind this encrypted traffic. But did you also know that in addition to that, there is some level of unencrypted information available in this encrypted traffic that we can use in security for our analytics? I will repeat this. Challenge number one, because everything is becoming encrypted, it is a double-edged sword, becoming difficult to catch the threat actors. We all agree with that. You also agree with the fact that threat actors are sitting and using this encrypted traffic to launch their attacks. You understand that that's a problem. My point is, there is a silver lining here. There is information which is unencrypted in this encrypted traffic, which we are not leveraging today to make meaningful security decisions. And what is that is what I'm going to start opening up. Now, all of us believe that we've got so many different security solutions and we're going to do direct inspection on it, use our signature, use our threat intelligence, and make sense out of it. Well, believe me, and I'm going to make a slightly light statement here, the more it gets encrypted, the more it gets darker. All you can do is only sit and stare on it. You can't make any sense out of it. What you have to move into is the concept of inference, which is, can I infer from this encrypted data and make security decisions? That is what I'm trying to allude to. And yes, you can make some level of accurate inference from this data because there are some unencrypted observables available on this data. Number two, there is a concept of digital fingerprinting that you can bring into purpose using machine learning, basis which you can make attributions to state who is this person, what is the person doing, and make a decision on whether, from an outcome perspective, is this something which is clean or malicious, which opens up the conversation into what is this whole idea of TLS fingerprinting. Now, before I get further onto this, due credits to Mr. Blake Anderson and David McGrew from Cisco, who've done a lot of work here and have kind of posted the links as well, who did a lot of pioneering work in the TLS fingerprinting space, which I am going to be talking of as we progress. So what is the basic concept I'm really trying to talk about? Enough and more data in the network today. I need to label it to figure out who is really initiating all this. Is it Alice? Is it Anubhav? Is it Bob? Is it coming in from a PDF application? Is it a printer? And now, because I've been able to clearly state who is really initiating this or who does it belong to, what is the role, I am now in a better position to do behavior models on this person to say printers should be acting like printers and not like scanners, clearly, because if the printer is doing scanning, I don't think it is a printer. It is a printer gone wrong. And a vulnerability scanner should be doing a vulnerability scanner's job. And if I'm seeing a scanning activity in the network, it not necessarily is malicious activity because I have a vulnerability scanner to do that job. So the message on this slide is, can I use effective techniques on dark data to come back and determine and use machine learning to determine fingerprint where it is coming from? By fingerprint, I'll speak about it later. And once I've fingerprinted, I'm very sure it is this person. This is the behavior the person should exhibit. And now I know where to find the anomalies. Now, why did I pick up the importance of fingerprinting? Fingerprinting is very, very important here because typically if you go by the definition of a fingerprint is unique. So it is known in the world that you really cannot find two people with the same fingerprint. That's one thing. Fingerprint can be tagged back to recognize a person. We all know that. And the beauty is the fingerprint can be used time and again. It doesn't have a short shelf life. So if my fingerprint existed today, 10 years, I'm assuming it should stay the same. It cannot change. So that is why importance of fingerprinting comes into picture. So the source of success here is that you should be able to fingerprint correctly so that now you are very sure that this behavior is coming in from this particular person. And this is how you should be determining what kind of behavior is good or bad. Now, I'll take an example. You can make certain decisions on an object. The object has a sharp blade, it has a particular shape, it has a handle. Okay, some level of information I have. I classify it as a knife. Now, to what extent can I classify this better depends on what type of knife it is. Is it a knife that is being used by a chef, or is it a normal knife, that you typically use for other mundane jobs, or is it basically a hammer? So can I classify the object correctly is something you need to look at. Now, how do you complement this with observables in the network? And I'm trying to move this conversation slightly into the network space. I get so much of information from the network through machine learning, and I call them observables. Now that observable gives me some level of information that this, and then this can come in from your TLS traffic as well, that this information is coming with a process class of it being Google Chrome with a 64-bit OS X, or this observable is coming in specifically related to a malware activity, or this observable in green that I'm seeing is coming in from a Metasploit SSL scanner. So I am trying to now marry some of the attributes that I see from an observables perspective to make a deterministic decision and be very sure that I'm really calling it a knife or a chef's knife. Moving on, the true importance of all this comes into picture where you leapfrog from just making a decision on what role is this particular user or what this particular object is doing to what behavior it exhibits. It's not just about making a comfortable decision and saying, yes, this is a chef's knife. I want to be doubly sure whether this chef's knife was being used for a good activity or a bad activity. Or in other words, let's go back to the network security space. I am seeing that there is some scanning activity going on the network, the one you see in the lighter shade of green. Okay, the process class was extremely accurate, but was this scanning activity unaccounted for? Was it a clean activity or a malicious activity? Is where you want to use this machine learning into. That is where we typically tend to fail. We have great solutions which give you a lot of machine learning information saying, you know what, I found out that this is coming in from a printer. Great. But printer is doing a job of a printer. You didn't really tell me anything important. But yes, when you told me that the printer was doing a scanning activity, I would like to use that more effectively. And that is what leapfrogs the first stage of fingerprinting into the second stage, where you take it to the level of behavior analytics. I took the example of a chef's knife. We all know chef's knife used for preparations in the kitchen. It's got a very sharp blade. It's got a good handle so that the user can hold it perfectly. Let's get some behaviors out of the chef's knife. On day one, on Monday, the chef used it to prepare a meal. So I fingerprinted the knife very well. I figured out that this is basically a chef's knife. And I also caught some behavior that was used to prepare meals, no problem. Tuesday, on the day, apparently it was used for a murder weapon. And in my analytics, on the night of Tuesday, on Tuesday's night, I picked up a passenger who was carrying the same knife on an aeroplane. So what I've successfully done is I have fingerprinted what the object was, and I've fingerprinted it to modeling good behavior from it. And now I'm also trying to pick up whether the behavior was good or bad. Taking it back to the printer example I've been taking from a long time. I use my TLS fingerprinting techniques, use some processes to identify it for the printer. Great. I have some behavior profiles in place to tell me that the printer connects to the network. It has some distinct pattern on traffic volumes. It can also connect to different users from a management perspective. Fair enough. But now I see this printer having a connection to the AWS and starting to do some anomalous activity. So how do I marry that machine learning I did to find out this is a printer to the behaviors it exhibited is going to determine the success of your security analytics tools that you're talking about. And it has various levels of inference that have to be looked into. Number one is the basic level of inference, which told you that this was a printer. Two, leveraging data which is relevant and contextual to your local domain. It could be you're being a part of a global threat actor campaign. And I'll take the example back of this scanning activity going on in the network. So there was basically a scanning activity being done by this printer, which is a compliance violation. Can I pick that up? And as I go and keep doing these levels of inferences, I come back and determine that, yes, this printer classified correctly, determined some bad activity, which was anomalous in nature. That was one part of it. The other example I want to give is using some of this encrypted data, and I'm talking about the initial data packet which is available in encrypted data that we use. There are so many different activities that you can pick up, and what you see on the right hand side of the screen is an example of some of these initial data packets telling you that a person is doing a basic search on Google versus somebody initiating a command and control activity versus somebody trying to do an exfiltration and a key logging activity. So I'm saying the power of this unencrypted data by virtue of the initial data packets being available on your encrypted data can be leveraged for security analytics. And that's what something that we have been doing very, very effectively on the security analytics solution that we do at Cisco StealthWatch. Now, in summary, what I spoke of again with the outcome in mind was lots of telemetry data I had. I picked that data, did synthesis on that data, picked up the initial data packet, lots of information available there for me. And I was able to use it to make a detection on malicious activity or something to do with cryptographic compliance, which was this example that I was trying to tell you, where consider that I'm seeing a lot of activity of devices using TLS 1.0 in your network. Come on, that's a writing on the wall. If you're still using TLS 1.0 and you didn't know about it, that's a perfect case of cryptographic compliance not being met. And this is where your machine learning can really help you, find some of this information. Now, that was the science behind all of it. And I'm going to now start converging and start closing the conversation. All of this is good if it's effective, and takes me back to the example of watching movies. Because some of us watched Deadpool, we may also want to watch X-Men or Flash or Captain America. Good or bad? What are the stakes here? You could go wrong, and say, well, this is not relevant to me. But the stakes are very low. But going back to the example I shared initially to you, the efficacy of all the analytics that you're doing in security is very high, because you're doing this to improve your fidelity in terms of finding the relevant alerts. You're doing this to reduce your cybersecurity fatigue. And you're doing this to ensure that you do not add to the productivity woes in your organization. You don't want to start going and doing a cleanup on your senior leadership's machines because you suspect there was an activity there. You better be sure about it. And that's why the fidelity of the security analytics becomes important. And that's why every alert that your security analytics solution picks up for you better be helpful. And what we do here with the solution I'm talking about, and I'm going to be unveiling that solution called StealthWatch Cloud, has that built into it, which means each time it throws up a set of observables, it will filter them out to relevant alerts for you. So if it had 1,000 odd observables, it will filter them out to say about 10 alerts that are meaningful to you. But it will not let you close the alert till you gave a feedback saying, was this helpful to you? If it was helpful, great. If it was not, it goes back into the engineering to go back and check what were the steps we took, what were the competency questions we asked to make a deterministic decision that this is an alert that the customer needs to look at. And that is a continuous process. And here are some statistics which indicate the rolling average of the percentage of these alerts that our customers have come back and told were, and this number averages around 95%. So almost 95% of these alerts have been accurate. And I'm talking about high fidelity alerts here, not all the observables. The reduced high fidelity alerts that got thrown up by StealthWatch Cloud, that was the efficacy that mattered. So here, it's not just about the maths. It's not about how many alerts you threw. It's about how many of those alerts became helpful to the customer. Now let's come back to the outcome. The outcome we are trying to drive here is, let's take the example of a user in the organization who was determined to have a malware sitting on the machine on 9th. The true essence of all this analytics is not about just saying that I have concluded that this particular machine is having a malware. I need to be able to justify and stand up to all the preceding events that happened that led up to me to make this deterministic decision that this is really a malware and this machine needs to really be quarantined and re-imaged. And I have set of activities that now give me that confirmation, which is maybe a spam tracking activity, maybe there was an information stealer activity going on. There was a lot of uploading into the Dropbox, and there was a lot of malicious HTTP traffic, which was recurring in nature. So all this information, as a user, you should be able to ask and query your tool to tell, why are you telling me that there is a malware here? Can I double click and tell, see the machine learning that you have done and the set of observables associated to consolidate this into what we typically are determining this as a malicious activity. And that is the entire essence of what I spoke. So what I said was, build a multi-layer analytical pipeline, which means gather as much as data as you can, which should become the source of your analytics. Basis that, do two things. Classify the events, do the event classification. Number two, do the entity modeling. Be sure it's a chef knife or it's a printer or what it is. Do the relationship modeling and then come out with more probabilistic and deterministic techniques to be very sure that what you are seeing and learning are making the life of your incident responder, your SecOps teams, and the other people who are going to consume this data more effective. Now, this is the entire essence of what I want to speak of. Now, changing gears a little bit and sharing with you how StealthWatch Cloud, which is the tool I'm alluding to, which does all this for you, how does it really do all this data for you? So basically, from a ingestion of data perspective, it collects a lot of inputs. It could be IP metadata, it could be system logs, it could be security events, could be passive DNS records that it's picking up, some level of external intelligence, vulnerability scans, and so on and so forth. It picks up all that data, does its entity modeling, and is able to perform an analysis basis these 5 important criteria. What's the role of the device? Is it a printer? Is it an Android phone? Is it an iOS device? Which group does it come into? Because this group typically has a specific behavior on ports and protocols that they've been using. How consistent have they been with their behavior? These are the competency questions that we have to ask and ensure that the conclusions are accurate for us. And does it generally talk internally or does it talk externally as well? And now I'm seeing, typically it was supposed to be talking only to internal consumers, and now it started talking to internet as well. How much data does it generally receive? Can I forecast it? So this is how the tool is able to consume, run its algorithms, and make some of those decisions for you, which are high fidelity in nature. And for us to be successful in doing this, number one is the expanse of telemetry that we pick up, the wide breadth, which we are able to consume, run the synthesis on it, run the analytics on it, build those outcomes, and don't end there. Basically, go back and ask those competency questions time and again to check if these outcomes are still relevant, because the outcomes will change. And because the outcomes are changing, the questions have to keep changing as well. And to summarize, if you want to apply this back to a usable level today, all the advanced analytics that you get today with various solutions are on machine scale. There is no dearth of technology today. The question that has to be answered is it usable on machine scale? Can you use it as a user? Number two, when you're fighting this battle of analytics, are you able to get your questions correct? Your goal is not really to get the perfect and the precise answer. Your goal is to ask the right questions, because those questions have to be relevant. And the most important thing is to remember to relearn. The baseline is changing. Let me take an example again here. The baseline that we formulated 6 months back on how remote workers behave, if we kept the same baseline today to establish and make conclusions on security analytics, we would go grossly wrong. Because either we'll have a bunch of alerts, which may be meaningless, or we may not be catching some of the differentiated behaviors remote workers are exhibiting today, because all of them are working from home. So your baselines have changed. You have to go back and ensure that your analytics has to be on that baseline. And that is where I'm going to open up the conversation into Stealthwatch Cloud, which is the next part of the discussion I'm going to do, wherein can I bring in this security tool for you, which is going to improve your productivity, give you a view to the entire inventory in your network, keep a track of your compliance records in an organized way, and give you deeper insight using some of the entity modeling techniques that I've used or spoken of during the presentation. And the most important part is, can I use this as a reliable source of information rather than just getting bogged down into another set of alerts to look at in your organization? That's the true essence of this conversation. So I'll take a quick pause here because I'm going to have to now switch screens and get into a demo mode. So Vijay, just a quick, is there anything important I need to pause for, or can I continue?
Mr. Wahi, we have 2 more minutes for your session.
All right, perfect. So I think I am well in control. I will quickly share my screen. Please let me know if you can see it. I'm just going to give a quick view to what I spoke of, and then hand it back to you. All right, so are you able to see my screen? Okay, I'm going to make it slightly bigger.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so what I'm sharing with you here is a console, and this is the high-level dashboard. And if you remember, I spoke about the various alerts and the activities going on in the network. So what I see here very quickly is 2 alerts which have popped up. One is a recon activity where somebody, again, there are classification of activities that could be coming in from hosts. One is something of concern, which means the host is doing something which could be of concern. Second could be a particular server being a target. Third could be a host doing a recon activity in the network. There could be some CNC traffic, there could be some exploitation activities, and so on and so forth. What I'm seeing here, basis the analytics that is coming in, is basically somebody doing a recon activity, and I can double click on this and figure out who that host is. Similarly, the alarms can be categorized into, as I said, crypto compliance violations, packet floods, and so on and so forth. You could get a flow trend of how the data is being exchanged. You could also get intelligence on different users, where you made deterministic decisions on whether the user is exhibiting good behavior or bad behavior and whether they have a malware on it. And then you can go into each and every policy violation and dig deeper to figure out why this particular user has been determined to be violating that particular policy. So as this opens up, given in the interest of time, I'll also give you a view to how this can be done on the cloud. So StealthWatch basically also exists from a cloud perspective. So StealthWatch Cloud is able to tap into your telemetry data on AWS, on Azure, or on Google Cloud, and give you a similar view, and it can give you similar levels of visualization. Now, I spoke about these alerts, if you recall, and these alerts typically will go into the depth of figuring out whether there was excessive login attempts, was there a brute force activity, and so on and so forth. So basis that information that you're picking up from StealthWatch Cloud, you can make those deterministic decisions on whether this is malicious activity or not. And as is just come up on the screen, I'm seeing attempts of login attempts. I'm seeing inbound scanner activities. I'm seeing some unusual external server activity. This is coming in from AWS, which puts up something on the CloudTrail watch list. Somewhere a root account was used. So these are the different alerts that got classified. And if you go back and see the dashboard is only going to be representing some of these alerts that are critical to you. The associated observations could be plenty, but it's kind of fixated on the alerts that are useful to you, that are meaningful to you. So as I said, these are the associated observations. So as I said, the question was, outcome has been given to you in terms of an alert. I want to go back and double click and figure out, why did you call this alert a specific alert that I need to watch? What are the associated observables with it? Can I double click on them so that I am very sure and I can question you back as a tool that the determination that you made to call this as a bad alert is relevant to me? And that is where, when you close the alert, you're able to go back and give feedback to the tool saying, you know what, this was not helpful to me. I'm at the top of the hour and I know I'm kind of running short of time, but I'll take a quick pause because I don't want to prolong the session. And we can always do a follow-up question and answer session, but I'll kind of pause here and give it back to you, Vikas.
Thanks, Mr. Anubhav. Great session. And so we have been doing this session since March, and nobody spoke about machine learning in such a great way that you covered today. Excellent insights. So it is 12:01 right now, and we can take about two questions if possible. So if anybody has a question, please type it on a chat window.
I saw one question which I just responded to. I think there was a question on JFlow, and I think we do support JFlow as well.
There is a question from Malini Rao. She has query regarding user behavior analytics.
So could you just elaborate the query, please, if you don't mind? Or is this query on whether StealthWatch Cloud can do user behavior analytics?
I'll try to see if I can unmute her.
Let me just take a stab at it, Vijay. I think if the question is user behavior analytics part of it? Yes, absolutely. It's an important part of it. And in our case, we've got something called NVM, the Network Visibility Module. And I'm not sure how many of you are privy to something called AnyConnect, which has been the most used VPN client. That becomes the source of a lot of user behavior that we can complement our data telemetry feed with to do some of the deterministic decisions on user behavior. Otherwise, in any case, since we've classified the roles of different users when we are doing this kind of analysis, that becomes a part of this the StealthWatch solution as well. So that could be one of these things.
Yeah, hi, this is Malini
You
here.
are unmuted. Yeah, please put your question.
Yeah, so my question was, since we are here talking about combination of user behavior analytics, PCAP analysis, security analytics, So I just wanted to know, are we, is this kind of a all-in-one kind of a solution here we are talking about?
Uh, well, I would be grossly wrong if I said it's all in one kind of a solution here, because as I said, we start with outcomes in mind. Yes, user behavior analytics is an important ingredient here. It is done. The right way to address or answer your question is what determines the data, or what is the telemetry data that you're using for your analysis, because that will determine what will be the outcome it drives. So yes, because I have the ability to pick up telemetry data from a user device, and I could be coming in from the AnyConnect client, for if you will, I can extend it to a large extent to user behavior even when they are not on the net. There are other ways and forms of determining user behavior as well. I can look at their DNS records, consume them. I can pick up proxy logs and make deterministic decisions on user behavior analysis. It's a very, very broad topic. It depends on what telemetry data you picked up to determine user behavior analytics. And that's unfortunately the problem today. People will, or solution providers will talk of the extent they can go in terms of giving you user behavior analytics. You have a very good question that you asked, saying, what are you using to give me that analytics? So I think I'm happy that this question came up, because this actually brings home the point that I started the conversation. I can do a lot of analytics, but what am I using to do my analytics is the question that all of you need to ask when you're looking at a solution. So that's the right question that you asked. And I spoke about the telemetry we use. And in our case, the telemetry or the analytical pipeline is huge. And that's where it's very, very broad in terms of consuming a lot of information.
We can take one more question, and meanwhile, we address a question. Mr. Vijay, can you see if I can share my screen, whatever permission have to be given, if you can check on the background, and we can take another question for now.
Sure, Mr. Vikas, I have made you the presenter.
Okay, cool. So I
So-
should be able to share my screen. Great.
So, Anubhav, I was getting a query that for non-Cisco devices, how StealthWatch will collect the feeds.
I just answered that query on chat. For non-Cisco devices, also NetFlow can be used. NetFlow is a very standard protocol. In case the device is not capable of giving NetFlow, you can just span the traffic. You can just pick up span traffic and give it to Cisco StealthWatch. That's also doable. But I just responded to that question on the chat.
Actually, I am receiving a lot of queries, but interest of time, I think we can take it offline once the session is over.
Right. I think yeah, that's what let's do that, because we are already over time. It's 12:05, and I also need about 2 minutes. So maybe you can collect the questions and then respond over email or the other channels. So again, thanks, Mr. Wahi. Great session. And I will do a rapid, a fast intro of Elite CISO platform. So guys, we have been doing these sessions from past almost 3-4 months now. And every time we conduct these sessions, we see that somebody new is joining, right? So in the chat window, can you type yes if you are joining for the very first time? Elite CISO's webinars for the very first time if you are joining. Because I see some new faces or new names on the attendee list. Great. So many are joining for the first time. Welcome, guys. I will do a very fast intro of Elite CISO. So as you see on the screen, it is a platform for CISOs and by CISOs. So we are not a marketing agency or an event organization which conduct all these events. We are a practicing CISOs from the industry who have developed this platform, and it's about almost 2 years old now. And then we four of us founded this platform. So Anuprita Daga, who is on the webinar right now, Vikas, myself, Rishi Rajpal, and Fal. So we got together and established this platform. And the sole idea of establishing the platform was collaboration within the CISO community and knowledge sharing. So for collaboration, we have various WhatsApp groups, and we have recently started a Discord channel. So on the Discord channel, we already have more than about 200 people, and these are the different CIOs and CISOs from across India, and we share various information, threat intel, webinars, workshops, privacy discussions. So a lot of information is being shared on this collaboration platform. So if you want to join this, you can send me an email. I have already shared my email ID on the chat window, so you can do that. And again, from a knowledge sharing perspective, we do a lot of things every week. From past many months now, we have been releasing weekly podcasts where we invite industry CIOs and CISO, and they talk about their experience with different security technologies like security awareness or threat hunting, insurance, cloud security. So we talk about different topics each week. So you can come over here and gain some insights around it. Apart from that, we do a lot of trainings. And since April, I think we have been doing multiple trainings. Last week, we started CISSP training. And why we ventured into training, as I always say, we want to break this capitalism kind of mentality in the training industry where they charge a hefty amount for training. So CISSP workshop is about 13,000 rupees and AWS workshop is about 3,000 rupees, right? That is what we are trying to do, bring discounted trainings to our members. Unfortunately, the AWS security workshop we have to push because there was some mishappening in the trainer's family. So we have to push this training. But again, we are on, and when the new date is decided, we will inform the community. Having said that, let me come to webinars, and we do these weekly webinars. And since March, we have been doing these webinars every week now. So next week, we have a webinar with Checkpoint, and we are getting head of security engineering from Checkpoint. So we try to bring excellent speakers like today, Anubhav Vahi talked about machine learning, excellent speech, excellent insights. Similarly, Gary from based out of Singapore, he is going to join us next week at 11 a.m. India time and talk to the community about the zero trust. I think zero trust we have been discussing a lot since the lockdown started and people started to work from home. But again, hearing insights from different speakers is always great. So today's session is done. Now for today's session for CP certificate, what you can do is if you're maintaining your credentials like CISSP or from ISACA, you have to submit your continuous learning points, right? The CPE points. So we do issue CPE points. So for 1 hour webinar, you will get 1 CPE point. What you can do is you can go to the website and then click on the CPE certificate link. You will come to a form like this. Fill your email address where you want the certificate, fill your name. And if you are a ISC2 member, you can enter your member ID over here. Once you enter that and fill the secret, right? So your points of your CPE points will be automatically uploaded to your ISC2 profile. And then secret to download certificate, I have already posted in the chat window. It is vaccine, VACCINE. It is case sensitive, not uppercase, not the first letter capital, because after the webinar, I see people try to fuzz this all the time. So it is vaccine, all small, no spaces, right? Submit it, and as soon as you submit, you will get an email with the certificate like this, okay? And your name will be there, not mine. You can use this certificate as your CPE point. Now, the last thing that everyone is waiting for, the Wheel of Fortune. I think there was separate communication went out, like free ticket to AWS session and Alexa as a giveaway. So we are choosing Alexa because for the AWS workshop, we are still not sure when we are going to schedule it. So we've been giving away Amazon Alexa from past many webinars. What I will do is all the people, all of the folks who registered for the event, their name is on this Wheel of Fortune. I will spin it. It will randomly pick one person, and that lucky winner, if present on the webinar, will get a Amazon Alexa. Okay, guys. So I'm going to spin it now, and let's see who the lucky winner is. Unfortunately, Elite CISO chapter admins are not eligible. Okay. I know Mr. Gopi very well. Mr. Gopi, are you on? Are you on the event, on the webinar? If yes, please type yes on the chat window. Oh, but they are wonderful, Mr. Gopi. Congratulations. So I will get in touch with you and we will deliver Amazon Alexa to you. That's about it. Thanks, guys, for staying late. It's like 12:30 right now. I appreciate your time. Thanks, Mr. Anubhav. Thanks, Proactive team. Bye for now, and we will see you guys next week, the participants. So you can go ahead and register as well. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.